This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
From Philadelphia to Erie and from Scranton to Pittsburgh, it's Behind the Headlines. Hi, I'm Charlie Greenawalt, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined by my co-host, Maura Donnelly. Maura, welcome.
Hello, Charlie.
Why, we're right in the middle of budget season.
We are. It seems like it just ended, doesn't it?
It does, Maura. But interestingly enough, there seems to be movement after many years on many legislative issues.
Positive statements being made.
We actually had the governor sign a liquor privatization
Modernization?
bill.
Modernization,
that's correct. And they took a few steps.
Yeah, it's great.
But now we'll be able to order wine on the internet.
That's the best part. Get some good wines into the state now.
Well, it's important to talk about this budget season and how it's affecting our state as a whole, and a wine connoisseur himself, Dave Sanko. Welcome back to the show. Dave, of course, you're the executive director of the Pennsylvania Association, the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors. Welcome back, Dave.
Thanks for having us.
There's so many things to ask you about. I hardly know where to start. Certainly one of the things that we've heard a lot about during this last season was the need for severance tax. In other words, a tax to be placed on the fracking industry. Now, it seems to me that that's overwrought in a period when gas prices were driven down by Saudi Arabia and the fracking has largely dried up around the country, and that was the intent of the Saudis to begin with. But when the prices go up, the fracking will begin again. But we already have a local impact fee that the fracking industry pays to local governments to pay for the effects of their presence in those communities. What would the difference be, Dave, between a severance tax and the local impact fee?
The primary difference between a severance tax and the impact fee is who gets to spend the money and what it gets used on. The impact fee is invested back into the communities that are impacted with roads, public safety, fire, police, public infrastructures, water and sewer infrastructures, park recreation things. And if it comes to Harrisburg and in the form of a severance tax, it could be any part of state government. You wouldn't know where it would be going, but it certainly wouldn't be going into doing those things in the communities. It may go to pay for the pension deficit. It may go to pay for more state prisons. It may go to pay for more.
So it would just go into the general fund.
It would go into
designated otherwise.
Right. We'd go into the general fund and really then yet become leaving a lot of communities really strapped for the changes that they've had to endure with what's been a good economic development opportunity, but it has changed the nature of many communities in Pennsylvania.
And the local impact fee has actually been tremendously successful and helpful in those communities that are directly impacted by the fracking industry. Is that correct?
It has. It's enabled communities to do things that our townships in particular are good fiscal stewards and conservative in in what they buy and services what they need. So they'll save up money until they can afford to pay for something. They're not as big of a proponent of borrowing and using that money to pay debt service. So they'll wait a couple years until they're ready until they collect enough money to pay for a bridge instead of bonding it and then paying for the bridge over the course of 20 years.
Dave, help us out on this. What's the latest thinking on the Hill? If we ever obtain or enact a severance tax, will the local impact fee be maintained, or will that be done away with?
I think the belief from what we've heard both from the legislature, both the Senate and the House, Republicans and Democrats, and the administration, is that everybody sees the value in the impact fees, and that the impact fees would be preserved. It becomes unclear as to what that means for the severance tax and whether or not that becomes a credit or if those numbers might be reduced or directed a different way. So as with many things, the devil will be in the details.
Well, and I think it's fair to say that it is false to say that the industry is not taxed because of the impact fee.
Sure. Yeah, the industry has been.
It has a different name on it, but it's definitely a tax
Sure.
on the industry.
Between the impact fees and other taxes, payroll taxes and what have you. I mean, they have been payers and contributors to local economies and to state and local government cost of operations as every other business.
And you mentioned pensions. And the pension, you didn't use the word crisis, but everybody calls it a pension crisis. So let's talk a little bit about that and the impact that the pension crisis is having on our local communities as well.
Well, you're right. I didn't say crisis.
You
Let me correct that. And it is a pension crisis.
It is.
It is billions and billions and billions of dollars at the state and local level. I mean, over $60 billion is the total, and that's just between state employees and teachers. The local municipalities' pension shortfall is about $8 billion, and $7 billion of that is Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. So in reality, the lion's share of most municipalities across Pennsylvania aren't experiencing a pension deficit, but some communities are. And there are some good, meaningful reforms that have been suggested by the Auditor General and are being embraced by parts of the legislature and the governor that would allow for some of those for positive, meaningful reform. So as the state looks at doing state pension reform, there are similar things that can be done to help local communities. In the private sector, everybody has shifted to 401k type plans. Mm-hmm. That would be a wonderful option for local communities to be able to afford both stability and affordability for the community, but also still providing a benefit for their valuable employees.
Dave, something that's puzzling to many state voters is they have heard some talk of something called reverse revenue sharing. Could you tell us what reverse revenue sharing is and
Sure.
what impact that might have on state taxpayers?
Well, I think that, reverse revenue sharing is the original revenue sharing was got money that was collected at the federal level and then was passed down to other communities. Reverse revenue sharing is actually just the opposite of that. It's the federal and state government not paying their fair share and instead requiring local communities to come up with those funds. So instead of giving money to local communities, they're taking money from local communities to avoid paying for their own bills. So whether it's in the form of unfunded mandates, where they say, well, no, you've got to do this. They're forcing up local property taxes and local income taxes because of the state and federal government's unwillingness to pay for programs that they mandate.
So unfunded mandates are a form of revenue, reverse revenue.
It is a form of reverse revenue sharing.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. It is, as would be if someone were to start asking for communities to have to pay for state police coverage.
And they seem to be very popular, unfunded mandates. So how do you feel about them?
There are thousands of
Yeah.
unfunded mandates. The legislature did a review a couple years ago. There are some 6,000 unfunded mandates that just affect local government.
Just
and those,
local government.
Just local
Oh, my
government.
goodness.
And it's, as you look at those, look, everybody's for clean water. But everything has a cost,
Yeah.
And there are some things that should be paid for at the federal or state level, and not passed to the locals.
Well, here you're talking about, and we've talked in the past about unfunded mandates, but can you spell it out, Dave, at this point? When we talk about unfunded mandates, what's the cost to local government in Pennsylvania? What's the cost to individual taxpayers of unfunded mandates?
I think it varies depending on the type of mandate that it is. The stormwater mandates that are coming from Washington are going to cost literally $4 or $5 billion in Pennsylvania, and that's going to be on local governments. That's not the state share. That's not a federal share. That's local shares. That's a lot of property taxes. Mm-hmm. You can talk about the smaller ones like the cost of requiring public meeting notices to be advertised in local newspapers, as opposed to being able to have them on the internet, and where they'd be more readily available. Penn State did a study a couple years ago that said communities just in Pennsylvania, just local governments, just advertising for meeting notices, not purchases, not hirings, not procurements, nothing else, just meeting notices, is $32 million just for meeting notices. So
That's a crazy amount of money, by anybody's estimation. Dave, we've talked to you before about money that's being diverted out of the motor license fund to help fund the state police.
Sure.
Do you have any updates with us on that, on how it's going, or
Well, I
still
think,
happening?
I think there's still talk about it. There's still a lot of money that does come from motor license fund to go towards the state police, but there's an awful lot of what the state police does that relates to public safety on the highways. Pennsylvania has more roads than New York and all the New England states combined. So there's a cost to maintaining those. There's a cost to maintaining public safety on those. But the real cost drivers inside the state police, as we look at, as that continues to go up, and more comes out of motor license fund, because motor license fund was intended to be used for highway projects. That was the intent. But there's a portion of that should go to the state police. We need to figure out what that portion is.
There's always been a portion, correct?
There's always been, yeah.
Problem
It's
is
been for the
keeps-
last 20 years. It
Right.
started about $300 million. It's now up to $800 million.
Okay, that's
and
significant.
there's not significantly more police today than there were then. As we've added more police for casinos, they were paid for out of the casino fund. As we added more police after September 11, they were paid for out of Homeland Security funds. So as the complement has grown, the shifting, the funds have come from other sources as well. The real cost drivers inside the state police are the pension costs, and that's what's continuing to escalate.
We're back to pensions again.
And we are back to
Yeah.
pensions, and oddly,
Unavoidable.
as we talk about pension reform, and the legislature is making some remarkable steps towards pension reform, we would encourage them to do comprehensive pension reform, not only including local governments, but also having across-the-board pension reform for state employees, incling law enforcement. Because right now there's an exclusion for law
I'm
enforcement.
sorry, we're running out. We're
Okay.
running short of
No.
time. In the last minute and 15 seconds, one of the things that's being talked about now, there are bills on the on Capitol Hill that would require local governments to issue financial impact statements. What exactly is involved with that, and what would be the cost to local government and, again, to state taxpayers?
Well, I think the bills that are in the Capitol are for the state government to be required to do a local impact review of any legislation they pass, to what the impact would be on local government. When they pass a bill for Harrisburg, they look to see what the impact will be on the state. And they'll do a state fiscal impact. Whether, here's a great idea, can we afford to do it? That happens at the state level all the time. When they do bills that involve or affect local government, they don't do that impact statement. Nobody says it's a great idea, can anybody afford to do it? They say, it's a great idea, let them figure out how to pay for it.
Your association supports it.
We would be wildly supportive of local impact statements
might
on any bill that the legislature
It might
has to
eliminate
deal
future unfunded mandates.
It would be a huge step to help
It
with
would be
unfunded
great.
mandates.
Mara, 15 seconds. You have a question.
Consolidating local governments, good or bad?
I think it's bad. As we look at all the distressed communities in Pennsylvania, and there are only a handful, but the ones that are out there, they're not the little ones that are distressed. They're the big ones that are distressed. So it's not the size of government that causes distress. And frankly, if you look at the size of government, the local governments are closer to the people, are more responsible, and work best.
Okay.
Great.
Dave, we're looking forward to having you back. Next time we'll add a minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So many topics, so little time.
We'll be right back with the second segment of Behind the Headlines right after this. Stay tuned.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, helping hospitals provide healing, health, and hope to communities across the state. And by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions to make the commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States, and by Blackford Ventures, LLC, a private equity firm seeking to make significant investments in real estate, proven business enterprises, and their leaders. Find out more at www.blackfordventures.com. And by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Hi, welcome back to the second segment of Behind the Headlines. On this segment, Mara and I are fortunate enough to be joined by Ken Mash, who is the president of APSCUF, our union for professors across our 14 state universities here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Ken, welcome back.
Well, thank you very much, Charlie Moore. It's great to be here.
Hi.
It's a very appropriate time to have you join us because the budget's coming to a head, the budget year is coming to an end, and we find that how do things look on Capitol Hill for funding this upcoming year for higher education?
Well, we were fortunate last year. We got a 5% increase for the state system, which helped a lot and fill the entire deficit that the system had. There still needed to be a tuition increase, but it did at least stem the tide, because in 2011 we had a major cut, and then for the next few years we were just flat funded. So we know that the governor has asked for another 5% to go to the state system. We're watching carefully to see where the numbers move around. We're hoping we can get that 5%, but we're also hoping that what we don't do is wind up flat funded again, because we want to try and stem that tide. We want to keep our universities accessible to our students. We want to try and cut down on student debt, not add to it. So we're really looking forward to there being some further increase.
In addition to the governor having proposed the 5%, what are you hearing from the General Assembly itself about support for that or lack of support? How's it looking?
We're very fortunate. You know, we have universities throughout the state. We are not, in a Democratic area or a Republican area, and we tend to find that our support really is bipartisan support. That is, there's a recognition that our universities are the Commonwealth's universities. There's a special responsibility for us. The thing just gets down to what the numbers are. Is the money there? And we have advocates in both political parties, and the governor is an advocate too. We're hoping that we can get to that 5%, but we certainly don't want to wind up back at zero again.
Right. You indicated that 5% also came with a tuition increase last time.
It did.
Do you know if it would this year as well?
Well, I think what they'll do is they'll see what the increase is and whether or not that bridges the gap for what they're projecting.
Right. Okay.
And of course, there are some wild cards for them too, and we're part of the wild cards as far as us being in contract negotiations.
Oh, okay.
Well, you mentioned the word contract negotiations. Now, again, for purposes of full disclosure, I need to point out that I am a professor at Millersville, and I am a member of this particular association. But for purposes of full disclosure, it seems like APSCUF has been in negotiations
forever.
Yeah, nonstop for years.
Right.
It seems like the last set of negotiations lasted and drug out for a long period of time, and there's the prospect of this happening again. What is making budget negotiations with APSCUF, an organization that's never struck, so difficult at the state level?
Well, I mean, I'm tempted to say you need to ask the people at the state system why it is that they find it so problematic. You're right. The last contract negotiation we had lasted 2 years.
Okay.
That our contract expired last June, so we've already been at it now. It's going to be about a year and a half because we start before the contract expires. Our members are not happy about this. I think it's hurtful to our universities to constantly be in this contract negotiation phase. It detracts everybody from the important work that we do. But, whatever their rationale is, I think there has to be a point where the faculty are able to say enough is enough. And especially if, and we do know through conversations with us of the kinds of things that they're looking at, that they want to increase the number of adjunct faculty at our campuses. They want to...
Which is a way to reduce costs. You pay less for the professor, and there are no benefits. So it's a way, it's cost-saving measure, is that right?
It's absolutely. It's a cost-saving measure, but what we're all supposed to be in it for is for the students. So adjunct faculty, and some of them are great teachers. Adjunct faculties are part of our union,
but that
and we're proud of them.
The full-time, is that?
But it can displace the full-time, and if they want to increase the numbers there, it's going to displace the tenure and tenure-track faculty who are there, who do the advising, academic advising, who work with clubs and other extracurricular activities, engage students in research and those sorts of things. So you wind up hurting the overall academic quality of your institutions. And we don't have to make that up. We've seen it happen in other places where there's been this over-reliance on adjunct faculty. That is not a direction that we are willingly going to go in. And then on top of that, what they want to do is decrease really the pay for the adjunct faculty at the same time. So what they want to do is say that they have to teach 5 courses. Right now, the full load is 4 courses. They want to make it 5 courses. So in essence, they would be doing 20% more work for the same pay that they are getting now. And since that would be a full load for them, it would also mean, again, more adjunct faculty who would be there, less tenure and tenure track faculty that they would be hiring.
And there's no question in large measure about the quality of the full-time professors, but the adjuncts are problematic in many instances, and they don't have that continuing relationship with the students. They don't have the organizational memory. There's lots of ifs there, aren't there?
Right, and we're seeing across the country a backlash against the overuse of adjunct faculty. We are seeing adjunct faculty join unions and try and increase their pay because they get mistreated. We've had a situation in our system where I'm glad we don't mistreat our adjuncts. That is, it's not great pay to be an adjunct in our system, but it is far better than it is in most other places. You have instances, I was just on a panel at a conference where people were saying that it could be the case in the city of Philadelphia, for example, where you have adjuncts teaching 11 classes in order to be able to make ends meet, or teaching 6 sections of classes and then going home at night and being a bartender because they can't make their ends meet. Now, if you're doing all of that, how can you possibly be giving the close attention to your students, grading, and all the other things that you would need to do? And as I said, we're invested in this system. Our union has been around now, it's going to be 80 years that APSCUF has been around. We've been through it, and we've been major forces in turning what were normal schools into colleges and then into universities. We are deeply invested in this system and in our students, and we're not going to sit idly by and watch that change.
So let me ask you something. You talked about how it's distracting. You've been at this for about 1.5 years now with these current contract negotiations. What's the solution? Longer term contracts? I mean, is that a possibility, or how do you not find yourselves in this position just about every year?
Yeah, that's a great question about how do we
there a way?
Try and solve that?
Yeah.
And I think one thing that happened with the other public sector unions in Pennsylvania is when Governor Wolf took office, he said, "Look, I need some time here. We'll sign a 1-year contract. You'll get step increases, increments, for those people who are eligible for them, and that'll give us the 1 year to work on it." The state system never made that offer to us. And finally, when we put that offer on the table and said we're willing to do the same thing, what they said was, well, we'll give you that step increase for some of your members, and again, it doesn't include the adjunct faculty who would see no increase, but all of you, including the adjunct faculty, will have to pay more for your health care in every single way, more for your procedures, more for how much you have to pay into the system and the rest, which could, especially if you become sick, overcome that pay increase by far. No other public sector union was asked to do that. My members are not willing to go along with that. So we have to wonder why it is that they think that we're different when we know that, at our universities, it's the faculty, it's the students. That's what makes the university. And when the students leave the universities, the thing that they remember the most is their time with the faculty. Mm-hmm. And when we have data that shows that student satisfaction about their universities is very much tied to their experience with their faculty members.
Mm-hmm. Now, is it fair to say, Ken, that in the current round of negotiations that, in fact, the Commonwealth has not made any meaningful proposal thus far to even deal with or even to consider? And I guess whatever happened to the notion of why can't the chancellor get together with leading legislators in the General Assembly, along with the leadership of APSCUF, along with the presidents of all the 14 state universities, and say, what are our problems? How do we solve them together? What is the future of higher ed going to be in Pennsylvania? Let's make it brighter. Let's work together. Why don't we see some kind of forum of this nature?
You're absolutely right. And, like I said, I don't fully understand why we would be in the situation that we are in, so I can't answer that for them. But as far as the whole attitude about higher education in Pennsylvania, and increasingly with the state system of higher education, I find it extremely disconcerting that all we seem to be doing is talking about how we can get by with less by doing less for our students. And I think that the whole tone of that conversation needs to change. We need to stop talking about what we could do less, and we need real advocates for the state system, for public higher education, who are going to go to the General Assembly, go to the governor and say, not what we could do to get less, but what in fact we could do if we got more money to help students, to increase access to higher ed, to help people get better jobs when they enter the workforce.
So let's circle back to the beginning of our conversation. Tuition increases dramatically impact the students themselves.
They do.
Longer term debt, more expensive to go. How are our students doing? How is enrollment? How are we producing, great employees right now?
In the last minute and a half of the show.
No, I think we do an excellent job with the students who are able to come to us. There's a mixed bag as far as enrollment goes. Some universities have had increases, others have had decreases. But our overall enrollment over the last 10 years, it's been pretty much steady. We could be doing more. We could be reaching more students. We could be more accessible. But a large part of that is being financially accessible. So we need to think long and hard about what it is we're doing.
Well, that's where I thought this was going to go, that we would, the students are your number one priority.
Absolutely.
They should be everybody's number one priority.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ken, in the last 30 seconds, what's being done, if anything, to solve the problems at Cheney University?
Well, there's been a lot of attention at Cheney. I know that they're undergoing a number of administrative changes right there. So I think the first thing that's happening right now is trying to steady that ship to make sure that it can do the things that it needs to do. But that's another instance where we believe, APSCUF believes, that there's many students, particularly in the Philadelphia region, who could use a university like Cheney University and would be successful there where they might not be successful at other places. So we're hoping that we can revive that university and really, make it a great place for students to go.
Okay, Ken, thank you. We're out of time for this episode, but we look forward to your return to see how things are progressing. And we'll be back again with you next week on Behind the Headlines. We'll see you then.